and you're wanting to put together your conceptual framework. So this is something that we are going to be attempting to do in today's session. As we go along, feel free to put in some questions along the way in the chat. I see already a chat out here from Aman that says, is it the same as a one-page business plan? Well, not necessarily, but a lot of people do look at it as the one-page business plan, because if you really look at it, the business model canvas captures a lot of the essential elements of what is a business plan. But even though a business plan has other facets that are not captured in the canvas, so it's a gray area per se. When you typically talk about a business plan, you might have ultimately a business model canvas, you might actually have a financial worksheet, and then you might have a pitch deck, all of that put together. But a lot of people, when they say give me a one pager, the only element the business model canvas doesn't really capture are basically either projections or stuff like that, which are expected in the business plan. So it is not exactly a business model, a business plan one pager, but 80% of it is covered here except for projections and stuff like that. Okay, so I hope that gives you that clarification. So like that, like Aman has done, you can ask questions along the way, and I'll request some of the other co-hosts that when I'm going along, since I'm doing the presentation, I will not be able to keep a complete track of the chat. Do flag off to me is a question that I miss out. I'll try to pick up questions as I go along and try to answer them, but do flag it off if I miss them out, so that we can address questions along the way. At the end of the session, we hope to also ensure that we have about 10-15 minutes of a Q&A. There is no absolute hard stop at 1 o'clock. We can do slight spillover if need be also, because the whole purpose is to ensure that you get a fundamental understanding of the concept. That's what we are going to be doing out here. So that is where we will kickstart our activity right now in terms of the business model canvas. So here it is.
Ajay, just for me to interrupt once again, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So teams, if you can put your view as a side-by-side speaker, then you will be able to see the slides and Ajay clearly. I think that's the best way rather than the gallery view. Yeah. And I think we have a few of our friends from the other end of the continent as well. Hi, Daniel. So we have people from the US also joining in. Thanks, Daniel, for joining. This one, Brian Adams.
For sure.
Great.
It's better than being up in the morning, right?
Sure. All the best, Ajay. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Are you saying that everybody is able to see only a gallery view right now?
No, it depends on where they have set. Right now, if they change it to speaker view, we can see both side by side. Yeah.
Okay. So I hope everybody is able to do that, because obviously the presentation is the hero out here, but not necessarily the only hero. The other heroes are all sitting in front of the screens. Okay, so let's kickstart into the conversation about the business model canvas itself. What is it that we are going to be really talking about as we go along? Obviously, the origin. What's the origin of the concept of the business model canvas? This is a very interesting gentleman by the name of Alexander Osterwelder. He is a person who's really put together two wonderful books which encapsulate all the concepts that we are really going to be talking about into today's session. And these two books, which I highly recommend to all of y'all, irrespective of whether in this particular business plan competition or anything else in life that you intend to do, I look at these as two fantastic books to really delve into. First is the business model generation, this particular book that you have out here, and then a value proposition design. These two books by itself are very, very well designed books that were actually crowdsourced by involving easily about 400 odd people who came together to create the inputs that went into these books. And these books were obviously tested, validated a lot of these concepts in a lot of organizations before they were actually brought out. So ultimately, this is not just some conceptual framework that was coming out of somebody, only one individual brain. Alexander can take the credit of having put it together, but it's actually it's a crowdsourced kind of a concept that a lot of people have contributed to, and ultimately also validated in the real world with a lot of businesses. So these are the two books I'll highly recommend to you. Go and pick it up. There is also a website that Alexander has, strategizer.com. This website has wonderful videos that are also there on the concept. So do dive deeper into this if you are serious in terms of utilizing the business model canvas effectively. Like already mentioned to you by Pradeep, one of your first filtration criteria that will happen in this particular TiE University business plan competition is the business model that you'll create and submit. So the better you understand it, the better you will be able to create a business model that will make you go through the cut. Now, once you go through the cut, we will be doing a longer workshop subsequently for people who go through, where we'll get into the more detail. Today's session is going to be an overview so that you get a perspective. But these two books and the video link that I've shared with you will be an excellent source for you to be able to utilize to understand more about these fundamental concepts. So this is something that I want you to be mindful of. Let's move ahead from here. Anything that we discuss, and especially because a lot of you are students, obviously the whole expectation is we start with understanding what is the fundamental definition of a business model canvas. Okay, thank you very much. Let's go on to the definition of the business model canvas itself. So we have an interesting quote from John Magreta. Ultimately, it's even last time when Pradeep did a session on the pitch deck to you, he spoke about simply the pitch deck is being a story, right? And here also, if you really look at it, business models ultimately are at heart stories. They're stories that explain how enterprises or businesses really work. So when you look at a business model canvas, think about it that you are really putting together a storyboard, and really speaking, when you start putting all of these elements together, it stitches together beautifully into a wonderful story that is able to help, whether it's an investor, whether it's a colleague, whether it's a team member, whether it's a partner or possibly a co-founder, anybody that you interact with, it becomes a document that you can share your story about what your business is all about. It also, if you look at the famous Peter Drucker, it also answers some fundamental questions that Peter Drucker really posed out, as it is. Who's the customer? Right? That is the central starting point to the business model canvas, is who's the customer in the first place, and what is it that the customer values. These are the two pivotal points that are really around which the business model canvas first starts off. And when we do our session today also, we will talk about some examples on both, so that if you understand these two elements, the rest of the canvas becomes so much more easier. And these are the two fundamental questions that even Peter Drucker has spoken about. And ultimately, the other fundamental question which a business model canvas really answers is, how do we make money in this business? I know in today's times, there are some businesses that are seen as losing money and still being able to be creating valuations and being acquired, but the majority of the businesses need to make money. Now, if you do not answer this fundamental question when you create a business model, then you're starting off on the wrong track. That the making money might come later on, that's fine, but you should have a thought process clarity in terms of how will you make money. And then there's also an underlying economic logic that you're really trying to focus upon, that explains how do we deliver value to customers, right, at an appropriate cost. I mean, you might deliver value at a completely exaggerated out of the park kind of a cost. Does it help you? Not necessarily. So these are all the fundamental questions that the business model canvas really answers. And when you put in that attempt, when you put on your thinking hats, when you sit down and start working upon the business model canvas, the beauty of the whole process is that it drives more clarity in your mind. And that is a great starting point. When you have crystal clarity in your mind, crystal clear clarity in your mind, your ability to be able to share it with others is so much better. Now, because you're not just fumbling for words, you're not trying to figure it out, you have it clear in your mind. And because it's a visual tool, you're able to capture each of the pieces in its own place. If it was a document that you created, you might not be able to really connect to it in the same way as the visual tool is. So the beauty of it's a very powerful tool, and because of its simplicity, which captures complexity, you're able to articulate your business model in a much more effective way. So this is the basic underlying reason why the business model canvas is so very popular across the world today. Why is it that a lot of mentors, a lot of investors will also ask you to share your business model? Because once they see that in one page, they're able to understand whether you have a clarity in terms of the business that you're in. What is it that you intend to do? So going ahead, The canvas also ensures that it gives you a diagram that shows all the flows between the company and the customers, right? It describes the rationale of in what way is the organization creating, delivering and capturing value, and all of this on a single sheet of paper. And that is what is the beauty of the canvas. It's not a large PPT with 20 slides. It's not a docket of pages which each page is describing so many things. All of it is encapsulated into a single page, a single document. And if once you create the business model canvas, you put it up, you utilize it, it's an iterative process that you can really use. So this is the power of the business model canvas: the ability to give you flexibility, the ability to give you clarity, and the ability to ensure that you can communicate effectively to others. And that is the best reason for using the business model canvas to create it. So all the parts that are there in your company to make money are clear upon it. Let's go on and look at the business model canvas itself. The starting point to this that you need to understand is that the business model canvas has 9 building blocks. Okay, there are 9 blocks in which the entire model is actually created upon. As we go through right now, we are going to be covering each of these blocks. The first 2 blocks I'll cover in slightly more detail. The other blocks I'll go through. Now, if you need to understand these blocks more, obviously read the book, look at the videos, you'll get a lot more perspective. I'll cover them briefly, the other 7 blocks. But be mindful that when you're creating a business model canvas, all the 9 blocks are interconnected to each other in some way or the other, and we'll talk about it as we go along. This first starting point, like the Peter Drucker question that was asked, and even if you looked at the pitch deck session which Pradeep had conducted, one of the key questions that we have to always ask ourselves is, what is the customer segment that we are serving? And this is the starting point for the business model canvas. The first element that you look at is you clearly identify who is your customer. Do you have clarity upon that? And this is where there are a couple of things I want to make you understand. The first thing that you need to understand is that a lot of businesses actually, when they start looking at customer segments, they start identifying multiple segments. That's fine. You might have a lot of segments that your product or your service might be relevant to. Now, are you able to bunch them together through looking at common needs, common behaviors and other attributes? This is a good starting point, because if the needs are different, if the behaviors are different, and if the attributes are different, then these are actually different segments. Now, any business might actually serve multiple segments, and that's what expected. The skill lies in being able to bunch them together into common segments, and that is where a great model really begins. If for some reason, when you look at your own product or a service or a solution that you're launching in the market, that serves multiple segments, nothing wrong with that. The approach that you start doing is, first of all, in your mind, you clearly distinguish between these segments. That is a good starting point. And in the beginning, when you create the business model canvas, create it one segment at a time. So don't have to put down all the segments together. Take one segment, put it in, and then put in the other components of the boxes relevant to only that segment. Now, if you do this exercise for each segment separately and then look at it together later on, the interesting part is you'll start understanding what are the things similar and what are the things dissimilar within your customers. And that would help you to define your approach towards your market. So, as a company, as a business, if you have multiple segments, then ensure that you bunch them separately and you create separate canvases for each segment to begin with. Now, I will give you some examples of this customer segment focus. A lot of us, when we say customer segment, we say consumers, enterprises, small businesses, startups, something like that. Now, is that a customer segmentation? Not necessary. There is a higher level of customer segmentation that you can go to, and I'm going to share some very, very extreme examples of customer segmentation that can be looked at. Let's look at some of these examples, right? So, the important element that you have to keep in mind is that as a business, you should arrive at a conclusion to say which segments you want to ignore and which segments that you really want to serve. And this is a good starting point, because no matter how big you intend to become, in the beginning when you are a smaller organization, you have limited time, you have limited energy, you have limited resources. It is far better to focus upon the segments that make sense to you and ignore other segments, which means that you decide not to serve them. And now some of the examples that I'll talk to you is like this. This is an example of an extreme customer segment focus. In a small town in Turkey called Hatay, there is a gentleman called Ali Altun. Now this gentleman is a wood carver. Now he is a wood carver, and one of the things that he started specializing in was specializing in carving doors. Now you can say doors, there's so many customers. You could have carved doors in residential houses, you could have carved doors in offices, you could have possibly carved doors used only for decorative purpose inside a house also. You could have carved doors for so many things. Now Ali did not land up serving those residential customers. He did not land up serving only business customers. There is a specialization that Ali got into. His focus is only serving churches and mosques. That's it. He carves elaborate carved doors for churches and mosques. And today, he's so famous that sitting in Turkey, he supplies church doors to places in the US and in Europe. There's a waiting list of 2 years for a church or a mosque to get a door from Ali. There are no marketing costs for him, zero marketing cost, because he is so well known in this particular niche that he is now regarded as the number 1 maker of doors for churches and mosques. Now this is an example of an extreme segmentation, extreme focus. That means this Ali has now decided that this is the customer segment I want to serve. Now, when you as an organization have clarity like this, the interesting part will be a lot of the other things become clearer so much better. Let's take another example here. The other example is a company that's based out of the US called CJ Advertising. Now, Arnie Melham, this is the guy who runs this company. He is basically a firm that provides advertising and marketing services to personal injury law firms. Now, like again, if you are a company that is offering advertising and marketing services, you can say everybody is my customer. You could say a startup, a mid-sized company, large-sized company, maybe a doctor, maybe anything else. Now, this Ani actually isolated himself out from everything else. And even within law firms, his customer segment is only personal injury law firms. That's it. So he does not do the other lawyers that do other kind of cases, other kind of civil cases or other cases. He focuses only on personal injury law. Some of you who have been to the US or are from the US, you will know that lawyers are allowed to advertise there. You might see billboards, you will see hoardings, you will see advertising for their services. And amongst the most prominent ones who advertise services are the ones who do personal injuries. That means if you suffer an injury in an accident or something happens to you in a premise and you suffer an injury, you can sue and you can earn from it. Now, he does advertising and marketing for personal injury law firms. That's it, nobody else. But is that the end of his segmentation? Not necessarily. Now, the other segmentation that he has done, that he only operates in the cities where there are NFL franchises. That is the National Football League. That's the second criteria. That gives him a specific size of a city in which he will operate in. And the third thing is, if he operates in a single city, he only takes up one personal injury law firm from that city. That's it. He will not pick up a second client from that city. In every NFL city, he will have only one personal injury law firm as his client. Once they announce that they are launching in a city, there is a long list of companies that apply to become clients for CJ advertising. And he earns 76% gross margins in a business which is a commodity business otherwise. And it's ultimately, it's a servicing, customers, right? And
I'm not blind. No, I'm not pushing you.
wonderful, Cherry. Nice to hear that. We'll love to see you muted also. Thank you, Cherry. So there is a great example of, it's not just about going after only one category of lawyers, right? It's not that he did not go after all professionals, he didn't go after doctors, he didn't go after all architects, he went only after lawyers. Within lawyers, in extreme form, he went after personal injury law firms. Within personal injury law firms, only one client in each city. And there's a long waiting list of clients who would love to work with him, and he can ask prices that he wants because he guarantees that he'll make you the number one personal injury law firm in that city by his marketing and advertising support. That's what he guarantees. And that is why there's a long list of people who would love to work with him. Now, he exited his business in 2018 very successfully after having built an extremely profitable business in a commodity market. A third example now, because these were two examples of individuals. Let's take a larger company. A larger company it's a German company called Winterhalter. Now, Winterhalter is, again, have some of you heard of this company? Okay, I see one question here. Aishwarya, if he had expanded his business to other customers, he would have scaled his business, right? Why didn't you? Are you referring, Aishwarya, to CJ advertising or to Ali Altun? Who was the question about? CJ advertising. Okay, good question. The point is very simple. If he had expanded to other customers, he wouldn't have enjoyed those kind of margins. He wouldn't have enjoyed. So it depends upon what your business objectives are, right? If your business objective is size and volume, maybe you'll go after a segment. You will go after going to every kind of a personal injury law firm. But if you really wanted to make that company and deliver outstanding results and in the process earn 76% gross margin, why would you want to serve more customers where with a single customer you could do? So it's your company objective. It depends upon what is the ultimate goal that you wanted. CJ was very clear that they wanted margins and not necessarily volume. If you are after a volume game, then the strategy that you'll follow will be different from a segmentation point of view. I hope that answers your question, Aishwarya. So now coming back to Winterhalter. Winterhalter is a German company that manufactures dishwashers. Now again, dishwashers, you can have dishwashers in homes. You could have dishwashers in companies, in cafeterias, in hotels, in hospitals, so many places where dishwashers can be possibly used. Okay, so the repeat question to that is that do you mean that both the way has its own advantage? Absolutely yes. That is a strategic thought process that you have to decide what route that you want to build your business in. If you want to build your business on a highly margin driven, profitable kind of a market where customers are coming after you, then you'll have to figure out that. If you want to build other things, so it's a strategic thought process that you have to take a call upon as a business and organization what you want to do. So again, coming back to Winterhalter, in the same way, Winterhalter could have obviously ensured that we were doing dishwashers. Why don't we sell it to everybody? But no, they decided as an organization to focus only upon hotels and restaurants. That's it. So the only focus, they do not supply to hospitals, they do not supply to schools, they do not supply to companies. Even if somebody comes to them, they do not have products for them. They only sell to hotels and restaurants. Now, they have 70% market share in a certain size, because obviously to buy their equipment, there will be a certain operation. If you are only a 20-seater restaurant, maybe you might not necessarily use their products. But after a certain category and scale, they own 70% of their market. And they have amazing margins, because what they did was they started going deeper into that segment. Besides the dishwashers, they brought in the water conditioners, the detergents, and that immediate service that they would offer. which made them very unique in that space as compared to anybody else. Now, like I said, here we are only talking about customer segmentation, and because of which these are the 3 examples I gave you that help you to understand that you can segment a market in multiple ways. And if you segment your market and you understand very clearly which market you are going to serve, that's a great starting point for your business concept and a great starting point for the business model canvas also. So let's really look upon it that as you utilize the clarity of your customer segment, and like I said earlier, I'm repeating it, if you feel you have multiple customer segments that you might be serving, start building the canvas for the most attractive segment first. Now, once you are clear about your customer segment, now you create the value proposition, which is the second box in the business model canvas, which is called the value proposition. Now, what is a value proposition? It is ultimately the recording of these. I've got a personal message. This is something that you'll have to talk to the TiE University team, Nishant. So please reach out to them for that.
So may I request the participants not to text Ajay for now on the chat because it may be distracting him for the workshop. Anything that you need, you just send it to the co-host or the host. We will answer that. Thank you.
Thank you. So now that you are clear about your customer segment, now you have to figure out what is the value proposition that you're offering to this segment. And this is the reason why you do not put up multiple customer segments in the same canvas. Because when you have different segments, the value proposition for each segment could be different from each other. It is not necessarily exactly the same. Consumer might expect something different from your product as compared to a small business, as compared to an enterprise. So depending upon the kind of a customer segment that you're going for, it can be different, right? In the same way, even within, like we looked at winter halter, right? If the hotels and restaurants would have a certain value proposition, possibly the schools, the value proposition required is something different, not necessarily exactly the same. So the reason why you ensure that you create the model for a single customer segment to begin with is to ensure that you have clarity of a thought in terms of what is it is as a segment that value proposition that will be offering to a customer, and how do you really identify a value proposition. For that, any which way, there is that other book which Alexander Oshwell written, Value Proposition Canvas. And what you really do within that is that you start figuring it out that can you create an innovative value proposition which is disruptive. Because if you are doing exactly the same thing that a lot of others are doing, what is the reason for these customers to start coming to you? What is the reason that they should look into you, right? So even if now you are similar to other things in the market as far as the value proposition are there, can you have added benefits and features? So these are all the facets that you need to understand, because at the end of the day, for any business to be successful or to significantly grow, you have to have something which is a differentiator, something unique, something different. And that uniqueness cannot be what you think is unique. That uniqueness is something which the customers find a value and benefit out of. And that is the only uniqueness that you should be aiming for. Just creating unique or different products is not the issue here. Creating a value proposition to customer is a more important aspect. Now, what is the approach that you do to do a value proposition? Is basically, this is where you use also the value proposition canvas. For this, you start identifying that what are the gains that the customer is looking from us, what are the pains that our solution solves for the customers, and what are the tasks, what are the jobs that the customer wants to get done. So you list this out for that particular segment. And then you start identifying that my product, my service, my solution, what are the gain creators, what are the pain relievers, and what are the products and services that meet those customer jobs. So when you start doing this exercise, now you're going to a next level of detail for you to analyze and understand how can you create a unique value proposition for your customers. And that is a very, very important starting point, because if you do not have a unique value proposition, there is no reason for the customers to be attracted to you. If you are not solving a significant pain in a very, very, very good way, then they are not going to come to you. If the customers do not see a significant gain from what you are offering, they are not going to come to you. So this is very important. So basically what you will end up doing is you list down all of these things, and then you start correlating them with each other. Then you look at that, okay, what is the pain? Like in this particular slide that you see out here, one of the gains down below, when you look at it out here, is low speed of execution, right? So then at the end of the day, what is it that you might be able to offer as a service or solution that solves that pain is something you think about. The gain that the customer is looking for, this is the particular thing where it's a marketing agency, is target market understanding. And this is the gain that the customer is looking for. Now, what is it that you will offer to them to be able to do this is something that you have to think through. Now, when you start identifying the pains and the gains and the relievers and the adders that you're going to be doing, that is when you are able to create a value proposition. And when you start looking at this kind of fit and you create a value proposition, this is something that you can use across now, because this will become your hero, the message that is there that can use in your branding, you can use on your website, you can use in your SEO, you can use your content, your advertising, social media, viral, everything. So the beauty of creating a great value proposition is the ability to be able to utilize it in your communication across the spectrum, right? So this is what is the key element. My dear friends, if you get these two elements right in the first place, if you are able to isolate out the right customer segments, and if you are able to identify the correct value proposition for that segment, that is more than 60% of your journey in a business itself, for that matter, because that's a great starting point. A lot of people do not get this right, and you land up wasting a lot of time, energy and money to discover the hard way later on. So this effort that you put in the beginning goes a long way to ensure that you can be highly successful in the business that you created. Okay, so this is the second part of the business model, which is the value proposition. And this is, once you get this right, keep iterating, keep testing, keep validating, but you are able to utilize it everywhere. So when you are creating this concept for your business right now, when you will put it up in the business plan competition, have clarity on the customer segment, ensure that you are able to derive what is the value proposition that will make sense for that segment and build it from that. Once you do these two things, the beauty of it is the rest of the canvas becomes much more easier now to fill in, because you have clarity about your customer, you have clarity about the value proposition. Both of these things are foundational clarities, are foundational to the overall clarity that you need to have for your business. I'm going to be stopping here to check some messages. There's a great video from Harvard professor on what a job of a product is. Wonderful. Okay. Do you have any suggestions for to have a check upon our value proposition, a check customer segment? It is in the right path. So the best check, Aishwarya, is to actually go and talk to potential customers in that segment. Go and ask them these questions, and they are the ones who will answer to you. A lot of us, when we create product services, we create them based upon our own hypothesis. And I'm not saying you're off the mark, but the best validation of that is actually, and this is where your customer segmentation definition becomes very important. If you go to the right customer segment and ask them the questions, then you will get the right answers. If you go to multiple customer segments and ask them the questions, the answers that you get will become confusing for you, because you will hear different things from different people. This is the reason why in the beginning, if you segment your market correctly, if you say that, I am creating a product for pet lovers. Now within pet lovers, I am creating a product for people who involve their pets in their activities, just for example now. So now you are getting to a level of definition, and now you create a product which is keeping their pets fit along with them, just for example, right? Now if you have done the segmentation and now you want to go to the value proposition, go and ask such kind of pet lovers or people who have pets, who are into fitness and who involve their pets along with them. Now if you are asking them the question, the answer that you hear will drive you towards your value proposition. If you go to all kinds of pet lovers or you go to all kinds of pet owners, the answer that you will get will become confusing. So this is my suggestion to you in terms of how do you really validate a value proposition. You can start with a hypothesis, but test it in actual reality with customers. In fact, the biggest mistake that I see a lot of businesses do is build product on hypothesis, build solutions on hypothesis. You'll go and invest, create an app, invest, say take a technical team, let's do this feature, let's do that feature. Believe me, a great product or a great solution or a great service, the foundational aspects is built upon are you building it on customer feedback. The more efforts that you will take, the better your product or your solution will be for that customer. It might not be attractive to some other customer, which is fine, because in the beginning, once you become the master of that segment, you can always now build yourself to other segments. It's not too difficult to do because you will have now the muscle to be able to do it. In the beginning, it's a small saying that says, if you try to be everything to everybody, you will be nothing to nobody, right? So the smarter way as a business that you can always do, go after a segment, understand the needs, their problems effectively, solve them, and then they will have much better acceptance of your solution. The amount of effort that you'll have to take to get these customers board will be lesser, and that will help you to scale and grow, build revenues, build traction, build visibility that will help you to grow to other segments later on. This is the reason why this segmentation approach is very, very important. So Vishwal Padole said customer discovery. Absolutely. So customer discovery, you can call it product market fit, you can call it any terms. It's a very critical part of building your solutions, your products, your services. Never forget that. Never shy away from it. The more time, energy, effort you will spend subsequently in life when you build a business to take customer inputs, the better off you will be from that point of view. Okay, so the end logic of that is ultimately creating that unique positioning for yourself. That unique positioning of yourself that makes you stand out of those scores and scores of similar looking products, services, solutions that are there in the market. And just like in this picture, just like that blue ball shines out, right, in that sea of grey, boring businesses, in the same way, your business model or your business should actually be able to focusing on achieving this. And the best part of this is that you can do this without necessarily launching the product, because you are right now putting in the efforts to reach that positioning. And with that, when you get into a solution or a product and you build an actual product or you actually offer this kind of service, then automatically that clarity is going to help you. So this is where the starting point really comes across. Now, once you've done these two, the interesting part is the rest of the things start falling into place much more simpler. The third element in the business model canvas are the channels. The channels that you will be talking to your customers through, and these channels for everything. These channels is for you to create awareness about your solution. The channel is for you to create demand for your solution. The channel is for you to serve your customer. The channel is for you to provide after sales service to your customer. These are all the channels that you can possibly use to be able to connect with your customer. How is it that your products, solutions, services are being delivered to customer? How is that information flowing? All of these elements get covered in channels. And this is that. Now, once you have clarity of your customer segment, once you have clarity of value proposition, the beauty of it is that your channels will start emerging much better. Let's take that example we spoke about earlier. If you're talking about pet owners and you're talking about pet owners who are also into fitness, now you know that you don't need to go into the stores that sell only pet food. You can actually use a channel of going to fitness centers. You can actually ensure that you're talking amongst the running community or some of the other communities where fitness is a big part of what it is. And then automatically within that you will find pet lovers now, and if your solution is catering to that, automatically that becomes a channel for you. So this is why once you are clear about a customer segment, once you're clear about value proposition, the channel becomes much more simpler, because this clarity helps you to identify channels which are appropriate for that customer segment and for the value proposition that you are delivering. Okay, so this is the channel bit. Now, like we say, these are all the things that you justify a distinct offer that you create, and there are different distribution channels that you can possibly use. Now, do apps come under a channel section? Yes, but ultimately when you say an app, right, it's still you need people to understand where to app. You need to market your app. So what is the channel for you to be able to have people signing on or subscribing to the app or downloading the app? Even that's a channel, isn't it? So channel by itself, when you say an app, now by an app by itself, are you offering that as a product or a service? And is there a way that you are communicating that to your customers? That will become the channel. right? So this is something that you don't distinguish as it is. Now if app is only a way for you to reach your customers and talk to them, then it's a different element and the product is something else. Okay, so what we really need to understand is that there can be innovation that you can start building in. A lot of people assume that innovation is only in terms of the product or the things like that. Now if you go back to the early days of Dell, right, when computers in the world was sold solely through dealer networks and computers in the world was solely sold through showrooms, Dell went direct. They created a completely different distribution channel. Customers would buy computers over the phone. They created a direct sales channel. They bypassed the distribution, they bypassed dealers, and they created a direct distribution channel. In the same way, if you look at it, a lot of innovative companies have actually approached the market to completely different channels, and that is why they created a unique positioning and a success for themselves as it is, right? So this becomes a very, very critical part to an innovation that you can bring in. If you have a lot of other products that you do what you do, is there a way for you to innovate through the channels that are being used to reach your customers and to talk to them and to serve them and to service them, any of these aspects? Okay, Ali, okay, the question I'm seeing is, so your channel is essentially your go-to market strategy. Yes, it's a part of your go-to market strategy, absolutely correct. As you said, Ali had zero marketing. What could have been his channel, sir? So the only channel that Ali really used was that he leveraged PR, nothing else. Because if you looked at that news article, right, he didn't really have to go out. He really utilized the channel of word of mouth and PR. That was his only marketing channel that he could use. And then obviously, how did he service customers? If there's an issue tomorrow, how was he taking care of it? Stuff like that. So these are elements that you could have as a part of a channel process as such. Okay. So the key important point that you need to understand is that a channel can bring in innovation into your business model. You could have the same product, you could be serving the same customer segment, you might be having a similar value proposition, but you could innovate even on a channel, right? And because of that itself, you can have a different set of relationships, different profitabilities, as well as people who are willing to pay differently in terms of your products and services. So the fourth box that you really come across within the business model canvas are customer relationships. And when you say customer relationships, it is all about what is the kind of a relationship that you want to have with your customer. Is it the customer is where you want to do it is completely hands-off self-service kind of a relationship? Is it a full-fledged end-to-end service that you want to handle? If you look at the banking sector right now, you will see different level of customer relationships. If you go to a bank like an SBI, there the expectation is the customer walks in, stands in a queue and stuff like that, right? And transacts. There is a limited hours to which you bank. Now, if you look at premium banking or all the some of the private banks and all, right, then they offer personalized banking services. The banker will come to your home, whatever the smallest matter, whatever the time of the day, right? So these are defining the kind of relationship that you want to have with your customers. Now, if you look at something like an Uber right now, right, an Uber, if you call, there is no call center for you to talk to them. Right, there's only an option for you to go to a chat message and put up an issue and stuff like that, because they have decided that that is the kind of relationship they want with their large volume base that they want of customers. There might be some other limousine service that offers you absolutely personalized service. If you have a number that flashes, stuff like that. So that is the customer relationship as a business that you can really define. And again, the same way, depending upon what is the kind of a relationship you offer, you can innovate on that and create a different positioning for yourself. I have a question out here from Lalit that says, so many B2B, B2C companies have social media presence to get feedback, so those social media acts as channels. Absolutely. So it's not just about feedback. It is in terms of channel. See, feedback is a reverse process, but you are putting out something in the first place, isn't it? So it's a channel for you to reach your customers. Like I said, a channel could be something to communicate what your proposition is. A channel could be something to market yourself. A channel could be something through which you sell. A channel could be something through which you offer even after sales service. Any of these elements that you use could be channels as it is. Okay, so this is where we have finished with customer relationships, and one of the elements that you can talk about is is there an urgency? Are there underserved segments that you can do through that? Are there unworkable things that you are able to solve, right? So these are all the things that you are able to work through, and depending upon what is the kind of a problem that you're solving, you can actually even define relationships that are based upon that. So the beauty of the model canvas is that it forces you and gives you the opportunity to think beyond the standard product innovation. It starts with segments, it goes on to value proposition, it starts on innovation on channels, it goes into innovation in terms of customer relationship that you can build. And now the fifth part, so this is basically what happens, we call it the right side of the canvas, right? And we'll show the complete canvas later on. This is the right side of the canvas. At the bottom, what you really have is the revenue streams. So when you look at the canvas, it is typically broken into two parts. One is what we call the front end, which is visible to the customer, and one is known as the back end. It's like if you go to a stage to watch, go to a play or that is happening on stage, right? Whatever is in front of the curtain is what is visible to you. What is behind the curtain is not visible to you. So in the same way, in the business model canvas, what's on the right side are all the things that are visible to you, and these are the things which are visible to the customer per se. So the revenue streams is what way do you make money. So now you might be making money in terms of straight out fees, might be SaaS. Earlier software used to be something that you have to buy as a box and install. Subsequently then software as a service came on, where a subscription model happened. Today you have subscription models on many other things. There are companies where if you wanted to do buying, right, if you want to buy home products, now you also have companies where you have a subscription fee like Uncle Sam's, where there's a subscription model that you have to pay to, and then subsequently you can go and shop at those stores at the lowest prices. So there are various kinds of models that you can have for generating revenue. What is the model of revenue that you can create can also become an innovation for your business. So that is the fifth box that you have in the canvas. The sixth box in the canvas that you have is what are the key resources that are required for you to deliver that value to customers. What are the key resources? What is critical and important for you to deliver value to your customers? That is something that you define in terms of key resources for your business and activity. The key resources that you might have might go beyond just people. It might be physical, it might be financial, it might be intellectual, it could be human. It's not necessarily we are referring to only human resources here. We're talking about all of these resources which are important for you. If suppose today I am sitting in an office of a company that is building up infrastructure in terms of food silos across the country. Now, one of the key resources that they require is money, because at the end of the day, there is a lot of upfront investment that they need to make to build this massive, 15,000 ton silos, right? There's a lot of upfront investment that is really required. So the amount that's a key resource for them is ensuring that they have a steady source of funding, whether it's debt or equity or whatever like that. Now, this is something that when you as a business identify early on, what are the key resources that are important for me to succeed in my business, that becomes a good approach for you to be able to build your business upon. Okay. The next thing that comes across is what are the key activities in my business? What are the key activities that help me to deliver value to my customers? Now, when you're talking about key activities, it will differ for different companies, right? If you look at Microsoft per se, their key activity is software development. If you look at Dell, in spite of the fact that they are a computer company and a hardware company, their key activity actually is supply chain management. And I'm sure all of you have seen and heard the case study of why Dell is able to drive amazing margins only because of their supply chain management. It's not because they might be making good computers, but a lot of other companies make good computers, right? It's not a question of selling cheap or expensive. The entire business, the key activity for Dell is supply chain management. In the same way for McKinsey, the main key activity is problem solving. If they are not able to solve the problems of their customers, so it's very important for you to identify what are the key activities in your business model that will help you to deliver that value to your customers and what customers will value. So this is something that becomes a part of key activities. Going forward, you come to the next part is that who are the key partners that you need to have to be able to operate and run your business and deliver value to your customers. And key partners, when you start looking at it, is you might have alliances, you might have franchisees, you might have partners, you might have whatever like that, right? So it might help you to optimize your resources, it might help you to reduce the risk that you have in your business. It will help you in all of these elements. So it's very important for you as a business model when you're creating to identify who are the right partners who could possibly help you from this point of view. And last but not the least is the cost structure. What are the important elements of your cost? So we saw the right side of the canvas, we had 5 boxes there, and we have the left side of the canvas, which are 4 boxes here. And the last box under that is the cost structure that you'll have for your business. So when you start looking at the canvas in this fashion, you can now start seeing that all of these 9 boxes are interconnected together. Clarity about the first 2 helps you to ensure clarity about all the others. Now, this is, let's say, the structure within which the business model canvas comes in. Now, if you start slightly morphing this into, now if you remove those other linkages that I saw and I put on the activities, and now if I start putting them into boxes, now you'll start understanding what is the template for a business model canvas. This is the overlay between those 9 things that we spoke about and the actual canvas that you work upon when you create it, and this is what is the form of a business model canvas that is ultimately created. So all of those concepts that we discussed, you can start looking at it in this canvas, and all the 9 boxes are covered out here. The amount of space that you had forces you to think crisply. It's not about writing elaborate thesis, it's about thinking crisply, thinking clearly, and that clarity is what you really build when you create this kind of a model. So this is the kind of a document which you all are expected to create in this kind of a template and format. The standard format is available out there on Google search. If you run a Google search, you'll find it. I'm sure otherwise at the TiE University website also they might have an option for you to access to it. So this is where you'll translate into. It is not about, again repeating, writing thesis out here. It's about being able to write down the key points and being able to articulate it to anybody as you talk to them about the business model canvas. The clarity will come and will be very visible in terms of what do you put into this. So there's only one aspect that you need to understand, which is not really required for you for the TiE University program, but as a generic level understanding that besides what is inside your business in the business model canvas, there are 4 things externally that you also factor in later on. So what are they? They are the key trends, the market forces, the industry forces, and the macroeconomic forces. These are things external to the business model canvas that you build in when you build a business. So don't worry about this. This is only for your information as far as the TiE University competition is concerned. This is not required here right now. But when you're actually building a business, these 4 things are equally important for you to be factoring in to your thought process. And this is the reason why the canvas ensures that it forces you to look at these 4 things also when you're wanting to build a business. So that's it, my dear friends. From a time point of view, I've tried to ensure that I do not really go overboard, even though I am 2 minutes over time right now in terms of the promised 1 hour that we had for the session. I'm happy to be able to answer any questions that you have right now for about 10-15 minutes, and then beyond that, these are my coordinates. You can reach out to me. I'm happy to respond to you and give you any inputs. I know that this was an introductory session. I did not get into details, but I hope it gave you an overview. I hope it gave you an understanding about the quality of the output that you can get when you create a business model canvas. And the last thing that I can definitely promise you is that this is a tool that will truly help you to ensure that you are able to communicate your business effectively to tomorrow co-founders, employees, investors, partners, stakeholders, anybody. So this is the model, which is a visual tool, very powerful, very strong, and can be very effective to drive clarity. Thank you. With that, over to any other questions that we have right now.
You can stop sharing your screen so you can be fully visible.
Sure.
If any of you want to unmute yourself and ask as well, you can do it. But please do raise your hands, and Aryan, based on the sequence, just let them unmute and ask the questions. You can raise your hands, and then Aryan will unmute.
Wonderful. There is a feedback form that you are all requested to fill up. You see the link in the chat message. So please fill that out also.
Still, we have a question. One of the inputs that I would thank you so much, Ajay, first of all, for the wonderful session. And I think I am returning the favor, or do I say I am reiterating that I actually decided to listen to the whole workshop while driving. So I have you on my computer on my passenger seat. So now you are my co-passenger. And I think that's the interesting part, because for me as well, as an entrepreneur with 15 years experience, still I feel that this business model canvas is something that can actually help anyone get insights into what they feel like. So please do use whatever Ajay has told you. He's kind of platonically done it, but I think that's enough for you to start working on the canvas. Like I said, the long-term thing is for you guys to work as entrepreneurs. Forget about the competition here, whether you win in the competition or move forward, get scores because of the BMC, that doesn't matter. But this is a tool that will actually open up your mind, because it's a visual tool. And the best way to do it is take a printout on an A3 sheet of paper and do it with pen and pencil. Don't try to do it on the computer. The mind works at 20% efficiency when you do it on the computer. Do it on a sheet of paper, print multiple A3 sheets, and keep on adding content, and then finally you come to a stage where you can summarize the whole thing in 2 or 3 lines. Yeah. Cool.
So I think
there are some hands raised, so why don't you?
So to add to what Pradeep said, actually go beyond even writing it, right? Use post-it notes and write on the post-it notes and stick it on that business model canvas template that you should put up, because that gives you even additional flexibility where you can remove the post-it notes and you can put them back in, you can modify it much more easier. So yeah, completely right, Pradeep. Don't please, I mean, my recommendation, don't do it on the computer at all. Take a large printout, put it on a wall, use post-it notes to put down the point, remove them, check, if you change this, what happens, change that, what happens. That is the best way to do it.
Is the question.
There are a few hands raised. You can probably call out their names and they can unmute and ask questions.
Sure. So I see Harsh Singhvi has a question. If a product is targeting multiple customers, should we choose which niche should we target? And I'll also invite some of the other people to give you that thoughts. When normally I ask this question, I tell them, look at 4 things, right? Look at what, first of all, categorize that if you have 3 or 4 segments. Now you ask these 4 questions. The first question is, how big is the segment? How fast is it growing? Right? So you need to have some data to be able for you to understand how big is the segment, how fast is it growing. And you can look at anecdotal data, research data, whatever data that you want. The second question that you have to ask yourself is that, is there something unique? The second thing you should ask is, what is the competitive play in this segment? Who are the competitors? What are they offering? What is it that, what is the competitive lay of the land? Who are the competitors? What are they offering? That's the second question you have to ask. The third question you have to ask yourself, that can I offer a differentiated offering in this space? Is the third question you have to ask yourself, that as compared to all the competitors that are there, is there something different that I can offer in this space? That's the third question. And the fourth question that is also very important is that, is it very easy or is it difficult for customers to understand this value proposition that I might bring to the table? So those are my recommendation of 4 questions that I normally tell people. Apply yourself like this. I'll repeat them again. One is, what is the size and the rate of growth of that segment? Second is, what is the competitive play in that segment? Third is, am I able to bring in something unique as an offering? The fourth is it easy or difficult for me to be able to communicate or for the customers to understand this offering? These are the 4 ways that you can identify amongst the segment that you have, which one is the best segment for you to go after. But I love to have inputs from some of the other people out here. I see Uday Kothari is here. I see Raman is here. So please add any other comments that you have on this.
I think you're the expert. You explained very well, Ajay. I have nothing to add.
Okay, Advait, Uday, anything from your end?
I'm good.
Okay, so maybe use these 4 filters if you want, or criterias. I hope that answers your question, Harsh. Aishwarya has asked this question. Thanks, Aishwarya. I'm seeing a lovely lot of questions from you. How do we measure the growth rate, sir? So obviously, you have to look at market research data. You try to look at anecdotal data that might be available. You try to look at the growth rate of other companies, because that sometimes gives you the growth rate of a segment if they are operating prominently in that segment. If a company is growing at a certain rate, it's an indication. So some data might be giving you direct information, some data might be indirect information. So at the end of the day, you're not trying to do an absolute statistical analysis. You're just trying to say relatively which is the bigger segment, relatively which is the faster growing segment, and use that as your first filter. You don't have to have exact data. Later on in pitch decks and all, your investors do expect you to be able to articulate the customer market, addressable market, all of that stuff. So any which way at a later point of time, you'll have to figure out ways to get a little bit more data. But in the beginning, it's a good enough starting point. Okay, if a product is still under research and development phase, how can we mention the cost structure? So good point, Tripti. You have to ask yourself these fundamental questions, right? If your product is under the research and development phase, at the end of the day, there is a thought process that went in terms of what price is it that you're, because ultimately it's not that you're going to be doing a research and creating a product. If it is outpriced in the market, it's useless, right? So at the end of the day, the product will have to meet some price points in the market any which way. Now it's your job as a business to figure out how do you meet it at a lower level. I mean, at some point of time, if you look at the oil industry, right, it was very difficult to extract oil in the US because a lot of that oil was in shale. Right, it's a different form of a soil substrata. It was very expensive to extract the oil at that point of time, but when oil prices went up, then it became possible to extract oil from that, and that is where the US oil industry also picked up again, just for example. Otherwise, the Middle East was for a long time the only OPEC was the supplier of oil. So the same thing applies to your business and your product, right? Your product has to be operating in a market framework. In that market framework, you will ensure that it is not that whatever is your production cost is accurate to it. It should be always the other way around also. So in my opinion, it's good to have a thought process. You might not have exact numbers, but it's good to have a thought process in terms of what is acceptable in the market, given that what is the kind of cost structure you should work upon. If you are not able to fit into that, then maybe you really don't necessarily have a product. I mean, you might have to actually rethink about that then as it is. Okay, and okay, there's a question, what is the deadline for submitting the business model canvas? I'll leave it to some of the TiE University folks to answer the question.
I'll take that question. So the BMC is primarily a chapter specific part of the competition. So you'll have to reach out to your local chapter people or contacts for getting the exact dates for that. If you have still not been connected by the chapter, when you had registered, you would have received a mail with multiple CCs to other people. Just send them a mail and they will connect with you and take things forward.
Right. Okay, and then there's a question. Okay, Advait, you're answering a question?
For anybody in Pune, in and around Pune, Maharashtra, the deadline is tomorrow midnight.
Okay, there you go. Okay, so here's a question from Kolkata, Rishi. I am from Kolkata chapter. 3 days ago, our chapter sent us the form to submit business model canvas. Today is the last day of submission. Okay.
Yes, so I think the chapter has asked you for today. We will request them to probably extend it by 1 day so you get the benefit of Ajay's workshop to work on it. At the same time, if it doesn't get, don't worry, that's how entrepreneurs have to work. We have to be on our toes. So go ahead and try to spend the next 6 hours making it. You have time till midnight today, right? So go ahead.
Right. Wonderful. So I see a question from Saptarishi. Says if you already have a selective segment, let's say only restaurants, for the dishwasher example that you said, should we again split this restaurant into several consumer segments that will reduce the possibility of better revenue? So the answer to that is in 2 parts basically. Each of your segments should be large enough to be able to justify your business. Ultimately, you see Ali Altun is an extreme example. I am not recommending that you necessarily do that. But if you want to build a large business, then your segment should also be large enough. Your total addressable market also should be large enough. So I would say that the answer to your question lies in what your ambition for the business is. And it's not necessary that every business has to be a Google, every business has to be a Facebook, right? It's your ambition. What is your ambition for the business? Depending on your ambition, you'll have to be able to choose a segment that is large enough to fit your ambition. And that is how you should really define your customer segment, in my opinion. Taking too small a segment also doesn't really help, because obviously it will be too small, too narrow. It might not be worthwhile for you to go after that. So that's the answer to that question. Aishwarya has a question again. If the key partners that we think about are giant businesses, how do you make it work being startups? Well, you'll be surprised. I mean, I have seen enough examples of smaller companies that have had partnerships done with larger companies, because they brought something to the table that the larger companies do not have, and then that is because of which they were willing to partner. If you do not bring anything to the table which the larger company will value, then they will not partner with you. So yeah, it's a good question, but the answer to that, there are enough examples. I mean, one of our classier examples is a company out of Pune which is into Wi-Fi network, that is by Kiran Deshpande, where a giant like Jio, right, has tied up with them in terms of providing their Wi-Fi infrastructure. Now, it's not that Jio didn't have the resources in our time, but they had unique capability, they had technology, they had things which Jio did not have, and they were willing to partner with them. So it's up to you. Do you bring to something to the table which the partner can value? Then yes, they will partner. If you can't, they won't partner with you. Okay, and that company is Mojo Networks, by the way, earlier, which is subsequently moved on. The question, okay, there is a question for Chennai again. I'm assuming that's a repeat of the question for Kolkata, I assume so. So I'll leave it at that. Okay, thanks. Okay. Any other questions? Anything else you want to understand?